How's everybody today? Did you miss me? I didn't think so. It's Pete here at Spawn Fly Fish, and again up to some shenanigans. So, last video we tied a variant of the Alexandra for trout, but as you can see, this is not your average trout hook. So now we're going to take that mentality of playing with a pattern to make it fit what you're trying to do and translate it into some salmon fishing. So in the vise today, we have the SA254 from Ahrex. This is a size 2, big hook, beefy. For the bead, we've got the Spawn slotted tungsten football bead, size 7.5 millimeter in silver, and then I've got 10 wraps of 0.025 lead-free weighted wire wraps just to hold that bead in place. So today we are again using some 6/0 black thread. 140D would absolutely get it done. And this one's big enough that if you needed to, you could get into some 210 even if you really like a lot of thread. So let's get some wraps on these weighted wires here to hold everything in place. So I'm making X wraps at 45-degree angles roughly, and then coming through with some straight on wraps just to pull it all together. Don't want any of that to move. And now let's get this thread on the way back here and give ourselves a little indicator of where we want that tail to stop, right? So typically I'm going to be right between the hook point and the barb, somewhere in that range. All right, so for the tail today, we're keeping it red, of course, but we're going with the Spawn Polliwog tail in red. So last time we used some of that base fluff, if you will, from a schloppen feather. You see there's 87 different things you could use for a tail, maybe more. So let's get this tied in roughly 1 hook length and angled up, angled back. That thing's not going anywhere. And now I just get cute with it, make sure I tie all the way back down to that little indicator I gave myself. And there we are. And at this point, I'll just look very quickly here at where that weighted wire wrapping meets up with this tail that I just cut in the name of keeping an even underbody. All right, so time flies is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a little whimsical, if you will. So we're not going to technically use Peacock sword in the regular fashion that it is in this pattern, but we are still going to use some. So for those of you who didn't see it last time, this is what Peacock sword looks like, right? Looks pretty much like a sword. And I'm just going to go for some rather longer fibers, meaning I'm going toward the base of this feather, right? Natural product, so keep in mind that each one of these be a little different. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of highlight the tail, if you will. I don't need it to go all the way back to the end, just let's call it 3/4 of the way. So instead of flash coming off the sides, I'm going to let the iridescence of this natural fiber, and in this case, talking Peacock sword, I'm going to let that iridescence do the talking, so to speak. Puns intended, absolutely. All right, so now I got another little cute chunk here for your side. And I'm going to just match that up as best I can with the length I did my side and get it tied in. And while this might not look like much now, I can assure you in the water, all that's going to wiggle and move. And so even if they're not 100% committed because of that Peacock sword, that red's going to be flicking in and out as it's moving through the water. And so we're just adding triggers here. So if one trigger doesn't get them, the next one will. If that one doesn't, the next one will, right? See what I'm going for? Putting a lot of crap on a hook. That's what it comes down to. All right, so now, instead of, this crazy body, I still want that silver to be very dominant in this body. A lot of attention here. And so we've got some UV polar chenille. So this is silver UV and quite a bit different as far as how full it is when you're wrapping it compared to standard polar chenille. And just keep that in mind. So like, how is it different? It's a little fuller. So when you're wrapping this, it's going to create a much fuller, denser body than if you were using regular polar chenille. Not a crazy amount, but in the world of chenilles and fine shredded flash, it's quite a big difference. All right, so let's just go ahead and wrap this. We're not using a rib, anything crazy, right? Oh, forgot one thing. Forgot one thing, legs. So yes, we are going to add some legs. And what I'm looking at here is this is my body, right? So if I divide this into, let's say, thirds, what I'm going to do is, I'll point it out here as we go. If this is 1/3, that's where I want a set of legs. If this is the second third, that's where I want that set of legs. So divide your body into threes, and then where the lines would be is where I'm looking at for leg placement. And why leg placement? I told you I want a lot of silver in here. And oh yeah, we have now in inventory here at Spawn the rainbow shimmer legs from Hareline. We carry them both in this version and in the barred version. Amazing, right? Look at all that color and reflection coming off of these things. So let me just, I've got 2 legs. I'm going to go ahead and veil them over my thread. And I'll show you what I do with them. Bring it up to the top, couple loose thread wraps, and now I can just let go. That's the idea. They're not moving on me, but I do want these legs on the sides. And so there's the first 2 on your side, keeping everything in place here. Now I'll bring these 2 onto my side. Great. Next, so we'll move up to where that other invisible line is for the 2/3 spot. And yet another set of legs veiled around the thread, and bring that up to the top. Couple thread wraps, boom, easy peasy. 2 legs your side, like so. And then you guessed it, 2 legs on my side. All right, I'm glad you guys reminded me, because I would have forgotten those legs and this would have been a different fly. All right, so now as far as like getting all this stuff out of the way, keeping it out of the way, is it important? Well, that's up to you, right? This is, again, a subjective hobby, passion, obsession, whatever it is for you. By all means, right? Of course, we all save money because we tie our own flies. All right, so here's that second set of legs, if you will, or the last one that we tied in, and 1 thread wrap, they're out of my way. If I really wanted to, I could bring this one up and take another thread wrap. Boom, out of the way. All right, so now back to our polar chenille, UV polar chenille specifically, and let's start wrapping. And touching wraps, it's all we need. And you see how that core is just going to kind of fill in that body, if you will, and that's great. That's something we don't have to do now. So here's that first set of legs, which was our second to tie in, or excuse me, first to tie in. And so go ahead and release them back and continue wrapping forward with your UV polar chenille. And you see the idea being that these fibers will move backward, but in the end, once we get this wet, everything's going to slick back. It's going to be great. And so don't fret if a couple of these fibers aren't flowing exactly the way you think they should. All right, so now we're up to that second set of legs. Undo that thread wrap that was holding them there. Pull it back and continue wrapping forward in front of those legs again. Look at that. Like we knew what we were doing. Love that. All right. Now we are getting up toward that bead. And yes, we are going to put some more goodness in here, but it's not hypercritical as far as leaving a big chunk of space or anything like that. And so I'm going to go right up to where I'm touching the bead with the core of that chenille. All right, a couple of loose thread wraps there. Snug down and get that chenille pulled back out of the way. Couple thread wraps, and now when you cut this, it should be a cleaner cut, and nothing's going to jump, nothing's going to move, and that's a lot of goodness. So now let me get back to these legs real quick. I've got that first set. No, make sure I'm grabbing the right ones. So on your side, I'm grabbing these. That first set, and this is the fun of using a lot of legs. Make you think. I'm a fan. All right, I just want to go to the end of the tail here. Boom, cut. And then for that second set, I'm just going to come down and sort of line them up just next to that first set with a little tension. Give it a cut at the same spot, and then of course it's going to be just a touch shorter, and that's exactly what we're looking for. All right, let's get this tied in and make it look a little bit neater. There we go. That's all. Beauty. All right, so now let's turn this guy over. So on the typical Alexandra, which this looks nothing like at this point, and I am going to get my fingers wet and just slick back some of this flash material so it's out of our way. There we go. All right, so in the typical Alexandra, you'd have this wing, faux wing, if you will, of more peacock sword. But unless you've got some sort of hybrid that I've never seen, peacock sword probably not going to reach back far enough on this one. So here we've got peacock herl. We've got about 6 or 7 strands here, the fibers from an eyed peacock stick, and that's going to be our dorsal peacock. And again, so remember, this rear sword doesn't go all the way back to the tail. I'm going to use that as my alignment as far as how far back to go is to the end of the peacock sword, only because, once again, not the end of the tail, but pretty darn close. So that's what we're looking at as far as that dorsal side of peacock. I'll lift and let it naturally split itself around that hook point. So there you go. And now go ahead and get that thread in front of it and trim out safely. Bingo. One last thing. This wouldn't be the Alexandra without some front red. And you can definitely throw in biots, much like Josh uses when he ties the Rainbow Yummy, right? He uses those pink biots coming off for gills there on the side and a little lateral coloration. Great idea. By all means, this is where red biots would come in. But since this is for salmon, I don't want just a little bit of color there. I want color and movement. And so I've got a Marabou feather, and I know you guys, some of you like this, some of you don't. But this one, I've peeled that leading edge, so it just has the trailing edge of fibers. So it's not full coverage, it's half coverage. And so here we are, that trailing edge of fibers left on. And now it is all up to me as I wrap, and I can see the coverage that it's going to offer. And then it gives me much more control over just the right amount of red. So I want all that silver still showing through. I don't want to completely make this a red fly. So you see that's about a wrap and a half, somewhere between a 1.5 and 2. And we're going to call that good. And now trim out that little bit of tag on your Marabou. Voila. Get everything flowing back the right direction here. We've got something that looks pretty gnarly. Very, very attractive for the fish. And the Alexandra, again, one of those few flies that was banned because it worked too well. And by all means, when you see that, there's something about that fly that works, right? Well, if you want to catch more fish, those are the flies you kind of start with or look at and go, well, what about that fly is so different from what I'm fishing or from the other bugs? And maybe it's something really simple like the coloration scheme. And I think that's what does it on this. But then you look a little further and you're like, well, all those properties of the peacock, be it in the sword form or in the eyed stick, catch fish. Red and silver catch fish. Silver on its own is an attractor, catches fish, right? So once again, if you were tying a 7-piece articulated fly and each piece could catch fish on its own, then the total of those pieces should absolutely smash. Same thing when you're putting a non-articulated streamer together like this. If all the elements on their own have been proven successful and you can put them together in a pleasing way, look somewhat aesthetically pleasing anyway to us, chances are it will translate. So there you have it, folks. The Alexandra tied in a much different version than you've seen, but all the goodness that makes this pattern what it is. So there you have it. Time to go chase some coho with this bad boy. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I sure had fun. If you liked it, by all means, click the like button, click the subscribe button, and we will see you all on the water.